This is Comic Shenanigans, episode 1087, a conversation with Jim Zub.
Ain't no stopping them shenanigans. Love getting into shenanigans. All up in them shenanigans. 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 Shenanigans.
Welcome to the Comic Shenanigans podcast. I'm your host, Adam Chapman. This is episode 1087. It's another conversation with Jim Zub. Jim is currently writing the Conan the Barbarian comic over at Titan Comics. We got pretty deep into the weeds on what it's like to work on Conan. Once more, we also talk about Conan Battle for the Black Stone, which is the recent crossover event. Well, it was a miniseries, but it was crossing over various different characters in that particular world in terms of Robert E. Howard characters. So this was a really fun and engaging conversation with Jim, as they always are. If you want to go back and check out previous appearances that Jim had on the podcast, you can check out episode 368 from April 2016. That was the first time we ever chatted. We talked about his upcoming Thunderbolts run at that time. We kind of retrospectively look at his Thunderbolts run briefly in this conversation. There's episode 794 from July 2020, episode 986 from June 2022, episode 1022 from January 6, 2024, and this is his fifth appearance. So it's always great to have Jim on, and I mentioned a few times in the podcast, but I've never been much of a Conan fan, not any particular reason. I just had never really been exposed to much of Conan, and so a lot of my experiences with Conan have really been informed by Jim's work. So I would definitely fall into the category of a newer Conan fan who's really fallen under the sway of the Cimmerian. So this was, again, a really fun conversation. I hope you really enjoy it. And you also check out those previous episodes with Jim if you haven't listened to them before, or if you're new to the podcast in general. We do a lot of podcast interviews with comic book creators. In the past, we also had Richard Starkings on the show, who's the letterer of the current run of Conan books, what Conan meant to him, and how much he really appreciated and approached lettering as the true art that it is. I think that was probably one of the conversations that really had me realize just how important a letterer was, which sounds like such a naive thing to say if I've been reading comic books for 30 years, but I think it's one of those things where we take for granted what good lettering looks like, and we can spot bad lettering, but we can't always maybe distinguish good lettering, because if it's doing its job, you don't always notice it, but if it's not doing its job, you definitely notice it. Anyways, this was a great time. You can email me at comicshenanigans@gmail.com. You can also rate us on Apple Podcasts, listen to us on Apple Podcasts, and listen to us on Spotify. Upcoming episodes include DG Chichester is coming back, this time to do a creator commentary on Daredevil Last Rites, which is Daredevil 297 to 300. We have David Pepose coming onto the show, I think next week, to chat about his current work, bringing Captain Planet back to comics, as well as working on other IP. I'm really excited about that conversation. We have an upcoming episode with Kelly Thompson. I think that'll be back in May. We also have upcoming episodes with Chuck Austin. He's going to come back, and we're going to talk a little bit about the return of Edgeworld for season 3, as well as some of his work on Exiles. So a lot of really good stuff is coming up. Please make sure to download the podcast or keep it subscribed so you won't miss all these episodes. Book of the Month Club, I think this month we're going to be talking about the original run of Thunderbolts for the first 12 issues or so of that run. Obviously, there is a movie coming out that is called Thunderbolts with an asterisk. I would really accentuate that asterisk in terms of it's not really Thunderbolts in the way that we know it. At least if you're a specific type of comic book fan, this won't be familiar. If you're another type of Thunderbolts fan, it might be familiar, but it's definitely not I would say the first 100 issues or so of Thunderbolts. This has very little in relation to it, or at least it appears to. Anyways, thank you so much for this long, rambling intro, and we will jump right into the conversation with Jim Zub. Enjoy. Jim, welcome back to the Comic Shenanigans podcast. How are you today?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me back.
Absolutely. It's been not that long this time. It's only been about a year and 3 months since you were on the episode 1022 back in January 2024. Now, at the time, we were talking about the Battle of the Black Stone was only on the horizon. We knew it was coming, obviously, with Free Comic Book Day 2024. Now, hopefully, people have had a chance to really enjoy this big crossover adventure that you somehow wedged into only 4 issues proper. So what was the response to Battle of the Black Stone?
It's been great, honestly. Yeah, it was, we wanted to make sure that every single issue was jam-packed with awesome stuff. I know sometimes these events can kind of get bloated. There could be just a wild amount of kind of crossover stuff or things, and we just want to keep people hyper-focused. So we were able to bring together a bunch of these Robert E. Howard characters and try and do this real pulp epic with some fun twists and turns, especially at the big finish. So yeah, it was a really cool experience. Jonas Sharf's an amazing artist, and we gelled really well. And getting to sort of play with these different kind of characters across time and sort of bring them together was a thrill. And just everyone involved has been amazing, and the readership is. It sort of proved to me like the fact that we've got such a good headwind right now. The fact that we've been able to prove to people, okay, the monthly Conan the Barbarian series is doing well. You trust us there, trust us on this. And so far, the readership has really shown that they do, and that they're on board with all of our crazy ideas, which is exactly what you hope for.
What I found so interesting about it, and I've said this before, so I'm not shy about saying that I'm very much a naive person when it comes to Robert E. Howard's characters, because I know of Conan, and I've said this before, that really you made me a Conan fan, or at least like I really enjoy reading the character the way you write him. I originally started reading Conan really when Marvel got the license back. I'm like, oh, this is exciting. I've never really had a moment to kind of jump in on Conan. I'll read that, and obviously Jason Aaron started that.
Right.
It really was when you came on board that I was really like much more invested and more interested in the character. And so,
thank you.
I don't know these characters, but I found it so thrilling and really gripping, and I really liked how you did make it very new reader friendly. Like, it didn't matter that I didn't necessarily know who these characters were. You made it very easy to enjoy them, and at the end I was like, I want a John Kirwan and John Conrad book. Like, I really like the interplay of these characters. And so has there been conversation about really spilling out all these characters? I know that there's a Solomon Kane book, I believe, right now, but what about the others?
Well, this is the thing. I think that Solomon Kane was the natural next step, because he is arguably the next most popular character. Like, it's him and Kull the Conqueror that are kind of in neck and neck, probably for popularity. But I mean, obviously I would love to do more with all of them, and we do have plans to do more with all of them. I think that's where Savage Sword really kind of proves its bona fides, because the Sumerian brings you in the door. You're there for a big Conan story every, 2 months, but it gives us a chance to really give those characters more space, play in different genres, play in different formats, shorter stories or more serialized stories, and show people that, Robert E. Howard's work is more than just the Barbarian. And so the Blackstone event was essentially a way for us to just kind of onboard that and say, look, there's all sorts of cool things here. And these characters are archetypical enough that we can introduce them to you relatively quickly. Like, El Barak is that kind of, Alan Quatermain, kind of Indiana Jones sort of adventurous character. And if you understand that kind of genre, then you're good to go. And Kirwan and Conrad are these eldritch investigators. They're like 1930s X-Files, like they're digging into H.P. Lovecraft stuff and unearthing secrets of these hidden worlds. And so it doesn't take a lot to sort of introduce them as the broad concept, but then it's trying to make them as charming and appealing and engaging as we can, so that people do want to see more, so that they want to see Agnes de Castellan or all these other characters going on other adventures. And in some ways that was about me setting that stuff up, but now it's also been a matter of we've got writers who are pitching stories of those characters to the editor, for Savage Sword. And so I've done my job as well, in the sense that other writers are like, oh man, I didn't even know this was possible. I want to dig into that. I want to kind of show where we could go with those characters. Obviously Patch Zurcher is obsessed with Solomon Kane in all the best ways. And he's got the new miniseries, The Serpent Ring, that he's doing that ties into that broader mythology. This year being the year of the snake, we've got serpent themed stuff all year. And our big event that's coming this fall that we're teeing up with a free comic book day issue, just like we did last year for Blackstone. This time we're doing, it's called Scourge of the Serpent, and it's going to be a banger. It's very different. I don't want people to think that they know how these events are going to play out. Like, I don't want them to be like, okay, it's fall. Here come the Avengers. We're bringing all these characters together. They're going to go through portals and let's do this thing again. What I'm hoping is that we can keep sort of fleet of foot and surprise people in terms of how we build these out and how we do. And in this case, I'm using the term crossover, but like with hanging air quotes, because it's not just going to be, all right, everyone goes buddy buddy on an adventure together. That was sort of like, and even when they did, I don't think it was that buddy buddy. There was lots of little conflicts and stresses across the whole thing, but that there's multiple ways that we can do this stuff. And I want to keep our readers surprised at every turn if I'm doing my job right.
Now, when you first kind of came up with the idea of the Battle of the Blackstone, I'm curious just from a mechanics, like you have the main book, it's hitting the ground running, people are really responding to it. Now you're launching the Savage Sword of Conan. How early in the process were you and Titan talking about, okay, let's do an event. Let's have something, that we tee up in the free comic book day issue. Obviously, The free comic book day issue prior to the launch of the series was a really big hit. So obviously there's a lot of expectations that, we're really going to knock this out of the park again. So what were those conversations like at the earliest stages to kind of develop what would end up being the Battle of the Blackstone and, again, teeing something up in the free comic book day issue?
It was sort of multi-threaded. So we were launching, Conan in 2023. That Zero issue came out on Free Comic Book Day. And obviously it was a stellar platform for us to show people kind of our mission statement. Like, this book is going to harken back to the best of the Bronze Age, but it's going to be new and it's going to be exciting and make you feel like you were reading that older book, but you don't even have to have read it. You can jump in on the ground floor with us. But if you're an old school fan, we have you well in mind. That was sort of the point of that Zero issue. And I didn't originally know we were going to get the chance to do another Free Comic Book Day issue a year later. As we were sort of developing the idea of the event, how we were going to incorporate the Blackstone sort of mythos and the mythology into our longer term storytelling, that was where we were like, okay, is this something that only runs in Savage Sword? Is this something that we do? I was pretty adamant that I didn't want to do it in the monthly series. And the reason why is, even just for me, I want the main monthly series to just be the Hyborian Age. That we use the Thurian Age because that's connected to Kull. It's very, very direct. But in terms of, I don't want the 1930s or whatever, different centuries of stuff kind of intruding into it. I just want to have, you get your classic kind of Hyborian Age adventure whenever you're reading the monthly title. And we can tee up stuff that gets used in the event, but you're still going to get a complete reading experience month to month to month. So then the minute that we knew we were going to use something like Solomon Kane or Agnes or any of those other characters, I'm like, okay, that has to be its own kind of thing. And I wouldn't say it's hermetically sealed, but it's like it's teed up in the monthly books, but then it's its own kind of self-contained event where we can play with those broader things. And very quickly, I think we realized, okay, a miniseries is probably how it's going to work best. There was talk, I think at one point, where Titan was like, are we stopping the regular monthly series and doing this instead? And I, with great bravado, said, no, we'll just keep going simultaneously. We could do this. And I don't want the regular monthly readers to feel like I want them to feel like it's additive, not being forced down their throats or anything like that. And so then it was a matter of finding the right artist and making sure we can make it all work, giving them enough room. And then, they came back and said, do you want to do Free Comic Book Day again? And I'm so used to like Marvel or DC or things like that, where it's like only one title or a couple titles are getting that Free Comic Book Day bump. But it's like, we're the flagship book at Titan Comics, and they, they're excited to give us that platform again. So at that moment, I was like, great. Now I've got a little bit more room. We can do a really cool prelude. We can tee it up and again, convince readers that this thing, is worth the cover price, that you're going to get something you're not getting in the monthly book. And that was very successful. Everyone's really happy with it, Heroic and Titan. And so wreck a good thing, we essentially looked and said, okay, it's 2025. I know what the event book's going to be. I've already planned this out. Like Titan and Heroic kind of know the broad structure for my epic sort of mythic thing that I'm building over these, 4.5 to 5 years on the title. And so every fall I have an idea for an event miniseries. And if we've got Free Comic Book Day, then let's use that as that launching platform every single time if we've got it.
Now that you're about to do another Free Comic Book Day issue, so is it kind of a fait accompli that you're going to get that issue every year now? And will be your launch?
Will there be a Free Comic Book Day next year? That's the real question. I think that's the thing that sort of holds us back is with the changing face of Diamond. Now that they've been purchased, does the new owner want to do Free Comic Book Day? Is that an institution that will continue? I think that's the only thing that would hold us back. Like, I don't want to speak for Titan until they've committed to it, but that seems to be what we've all, it's sort of like with Savage Sword. We did the 6 issues to see how the market would, if they could bear it, if that format. The fan base said that they wanted oversized magazine, newsprint, black and white, but, will they put their money where their mouth is? And thankfully the answer was hell yes. And so, Savage Sword continues based on that incredible support we've seen from retailers and readers. And the same thing will sort of hold true across the forum. If Scourge of the Serpent does well, then, those events obviously continue in that format. And we want to create a good pattern of excitement that you get a double hit of Robert E. Howard worthy adventures in the fall.
Now, you mentioned before that obviously you guys for Battle of the Blackstone, you got Jonas Scharf. Where did you find this gentleman? His artwork is absolutely gorgeous. And
right?
Such an amazing journey through that series, and the way that he was able to handle so distinctly like so many different tones, styles, and characters, and it all melded together so beautifully.
Thanks.
Where did you find this person?
So it's interesting because Matt Murray and he was the editor I was working with as we were developing all the Blackstone stuff. We had received, so we knew that De La Torre wasn't going to be able to be monthly. He was going to be able to do 2 arcs, a year. So he was going to do the first arc and the third arc. So we were looking at a bunch of different artists for arc 2 before Doug Braithwaite came along. And then Doug came in and we were like, well, he's perfect. We need more, Doug on the main monthly series. Okay. We need a third kind of artist in the stable. And one of the artists, I'm pretty sure Titan had sent us samples, was from Jonas, that he had done a Witcher graphic novel. And it was really moody and really badass. And I loved the pages and I loved the storytelling on it. And so, we had reached out to him, I think, about doing some variant covers or things like that. And then once we got our hooks into him, we were just sort of like, okay, let's have a longer conversation. And I had pitched sort of the broad idea, but I had said, we're doing this event book and we would love to have you on board. He had finished up some smaller stuff at Marvel. And at New York Comic Con 2023, we had a few issues out. We were of the monthly book. It was doing really, really well. And so I went out for dinner with him and our editorial team. And essentially over dinner, thankfully this restaurant, we had our own little kind of private corner. I pitched him the whole kind of Blackstone story and how it would play out and what the main beats were and who the characters were and all these time, different locations and time periods and all this stuff. And his eyes just kind of got wider and wider. But I talk a pretty good game. And so by the end of it, he said, he was on board, that he felt like this would really play to his strengths. And so, in my head, I had it that Jonas was going to be drawing our event book every year. But once he did that Blackstone book, I'm sure it's a complete coincidence, but Marvel noticed that he's really, really good. And so they snapped him up for stuff. He's doing stuff now in the Ultimate Universe over there. And I'm super proud of him. It's a great career move for him. So at that point, it was like, all right, now we've got to find a new event artist to sort of tackle what we have in mind going forward. And I'm super happy with the gentleman that we've hooked up for Scourge of the Serpent. He's another artist from Spain. His name is Ivan Gill, and he is going to knock people out when they see this Free Comic Book Day issue.
Now, when you're writing Battle of the Blackstone, again, how when do you know exactly which of these Robert E. Howard characters you're going to use? Like, I mean, when you're formulating the idea, do you immediately know exactly which ones you're going to use? Is it pretty easy to decide on these ones? Obviously, as you said, Solomon Kane's kind of the gimme. Because he's, the other biggest name. You didn't use Cull, but obviously you ended up using him later in the main book. So I'm curious what the thought process was behind kind of whittling down what you were going to use.
It was really a matter of trying to get a spread of characters with different attitudes and different outlooks. I also, once we kind of came up with a structure where some of them were going to get slain, it was like, okay, I want to have enough people that sounds awful to say I can thin out the cast, but it was sort of true. In unexpected ways, which was kind of a fun little turn that we got to play in that miniseries. Different attitudes, different sort of pairings, if you will, in terms of how those characters interplay. I knew we were bringing Brissa back, and so that was going to take up a spot, I guess, if you call it that. And that we had very specific sort of narrative goals for her as we were moving through. Kierwin and Conrad, once Jeff Shanks had sort of keyed me into these characters, I realized how special they were and how valuable they were to us, because they become, whenever I'm doing documentation, I talk about contemporary, and I always mean the 1930s, because that's sort of the pulp kind of endpoint of Robert E. Howard's writing, obviously. And so they're our contemporary kind of vision. They have the ability to look at this stuff a little bit from afar, because they've got the research and all kinds of things like that. And they can sort of make summations about what this all means that the reader can know is either true or false. They just give us a really cool point of view, and an academic kind of point of view that I think is really kind of fun. So I knew I wanted them in there. James Allison is like the original meta character. There's a reason why I used him in Serpent War, is because he really is this connective tissue to kind of almost like Robert E. Howard himself, and kind of that idea of the writer and the reincarnation and being able to see across time and dimensions. And so, as much as I used him in Serpent War over at Marvel, I couldn't not use him here because he's just too perfect, in terms of the role he kind of plays. But I knew I wanted to do something quite different with him than I did there. So this was sort of, I know some people, when we announced we were doing this series, they were like, oh, Jim's already done the Robert E. Howard crossover thing. He did it at Marvel. It's called Serpent War. Some people liked it, some people didn't. But I think almost like the Conan book itself, I've learned a lot. I'm a better writer, and we've got a different mandate. So it's like I could take all the things I learned and like, okay, look, this is, if you trust me on the monthly book, I hope you trust me here, because we're going to be doing a similar type of thing, just on this broader kind of pulp scale.
Mm-hmm. Now, sorry, I keep saying I'm curious.
No worries.
But I am.
Well, that's good. Better than the opposite.
This is true. One thing I did really enjoy about it, and how you played with kind of the form, as you said, that you were kind of whittling down the teams as they kind of went through. Well, team is a loose word, but this assemblage of characters, you have them slowly being whittled down as you go through, as they get closer to their ultimate source of the climax. I was really I enjoyed the third issue's I guess cliffhanger, because it's not what the reader expects to see. I mean, you obviously deal with it pretty quickly in the fourth issue, but I really enjoyed it, because it definitely felt like you don't really know who the main character really is going to be by the end.
Right. And that was very much by design. The first version of the outline I had, the issue 3 cliffhanger was a lot softer. It was just like, I don't know. I think I was being more timid about it. And then I was just like, why am I doing that? Like, there's no reason to. We can push this really far, and let's really go for it. One of the nice things about working directly for the rights holders, at Heroic, is I only have to convince like 2 people, like, hey, this is a cool idea. Or so we can do like the spontaneous phone call and go, okay, I got a better way of doing this. Let's go harder. Let's go more intense. And the trust that we built up has been really amazing, that they really believe in the vision I've got for the overall kind of line and where we're headed. And they know that we're setting up pieces for stuff that's going to pay off a year, 2 years down the road. And so it's not just about this one moment. It's about what it represents sort of echoing forward as well, which is cool. And when we talk about it, there are these amazing conversations. Like a couple of weeks ago, I'm on an editorial call and we're talking about late 2026 stuff very casually, like just, oh yeah. And then that's where that's going to finally, come due and which is crazy, and kind of phenomenal because that doesn't seem to happen very often right now in comics. So
for sure. Now, one thing I really did enjoy as well is how inventive you were on how the word is escaping me, but like the main evil creature that they're fighting against in Battle of the Black Stone.
The Blackstone Beast.
Yeah, how you're having the beast kind of track them down throughout time, and so even though they're with them earlier in their own personal timeline, they're being attacked and then kind of taken out of the game. That was very inventive and cool.
Thank you.
I'm curious, when you're coming up with, like, this sounds bad to say, but like a way to kill off these characters in different ways.
Right.
And obviously there's characters that mean things to different people, and obviously they're important Robert E. Howard characters. How much thought goes into how you're dispatching them?
I mean, I wanted there to be a shock value kind of element to it, particularly the first one to go. Everyone, when we got nasty messages about it, I was like, good. I'm not here to kick the hornet's nest, but on the other hand, if you don't care, then I haven't done my job. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I'm sort of thinking about what makes these characters tick and what sort of drives them in terms of their core and putting them up against this threat that seems impossible. I wanted it to feel, nasty and unexpected. And some of them, especially in issue 3, they kind of careen very tightly together because I didn't want it to feel like, okay, they're going to do one per issue. You know what I mean? Or, this is the climax, so someone's got to get it. It's like, no, we're going to take someone away from you quick, and then we're going to take someone away from you quick, and you're going to be like, wait, what? No. That's not supposed to happen. And it's like, sometimes death just comes. Sometimes things are less than ideal. I don't want it to fall into too episodic a rhythm that everyone can see the turns coming before they hit, And so again, it's like when I was going through and structuring those issues, I was like, that first one, we're going to tease it out because it's like, well, they're not going to kill this dude. And it's like, oh yes, we are. And then once we've done that, it's sort of like the gauntlet has been thrown and it's like everyone is on the table, Anyone can get snuffed out, which is the fun of it. So in that kind of way, it sounds crazy, but it's true. I even had, it was funny because Ron Mars wrote the El Barak story in Savage Sword #4, which was our Blackstone tie-in issue, and he was telling me how excited he was to write more El Barak. And then, Blackstone comes out and he's just like, or not, he's just sort of laughing. It was good. It was a good little, it was really fun. Just to be able to sort of turn that dial and amp up the intensity.
Mm-hmm. One thing I was very, I don't know if impressed is the right word necessarily, but I wasn't expecting, and I liked how you ended up doing it, was that you didn't do the stereotypical, I'm going to put all the characters together in the first issue.
Yes.
Because I would imagine there would be an inclination to do that, to kind of let's get it in the band together right away.
Sure.
Instead, you took your time with it and you were really developing, the moodiness of each of the different characters kind of, where they're coming from before they, depart onto this adventure. And so I enjoyed being able to spend more time with the characters. Again, I don't really know these characters, so I found it really great from a character building standpoint that by the time the adventure really took hold in the second issue, I felt like I had a better grasp as a reader on who these characters were. And again, if for someone who maybe already knows these characters, maybe that wasn't as necessary, but for a newer reader or someone who just doesn't know as much about it, I found it really helpful. And again, it kind of bucks convention, and this inclination to often throw everyone together right away and let the sparks fly, whereas you got to kind of fan the flames first before you bring them all together.
Yeah, it was interesting because most people seem to enjoy it. I know there was some criticism where people were like, okay, but we had the build up in the zero, like the prelude, the Free Comic Day issue. And then, the Savage Sword issue, we had these separate stories of the characters. And then in the first issue, they're not all together yet. And they're like, what, let's get this going. And you're like, yeah, but that those pieces all matter. Those characterization bits all matter. That bit of atmosphere and the backstory bits, they all do come to a head. Like, I'm sure, again, one of the compliments, I take it as a compliment. Some people are like, man, 4 issues. It's just like so much happens in every issue. I wish there was more space. And it's like, we probably could have done it in 6 issues, and there would have been more poignant moments, and there would have been longer kind of buildup of camaraderie. But I also didn't want it to feel, I don't know, the original pulp, Robert E. Howard short stories are always so explosive, and they do a lot in a very short, page count. And so that's kind of my watchword for these things, that I would rather have you, man, I wish it was a little more, than feeling like we wore out our welcome, Mm-hmm. So if that feels like it's sometimes sprinting a little too hard, I still think that you're getting more bang for your buck. And so for me, that kind of, that's my preference of the two sort of options. Like if it was some 12-issue maxi series and people were like, oh God, I don't think we needed the Agnes issue or whatever, you know what I mean? That they feel like it was just with 25 tie-ins and everything just sort of meandered and taffy pulled out. And you're just like, are we just trying to sell you books, or are we trying to tell a really cool, entertaining story, And obviously I'm trying to sell books, like I'm trying to sell a really entertaining miniseries, but every single one's going to have this sort of breathless, explosive pacing to it.
One thing I've noticed by reading the mainline book is that you've been, and I guess this is more a function of maybe the artist availability, and then you're kind of playing within it. But, you have each arc is essentially 4 chapters, or you have 4 issues per artist, as opposed to what we've, I guess, been conditioned to over the years from Marvel and DC as usually being kind of a 6-issue experience as opposed to 4. Was that a conscious decision, or was that more based on artist availability? And how do you think it challenges you as a writer you don't have as many pages, but
right.
To play with, so you have tighter stories? Do you think that is a good thing for your writing? Do you wish you sometimes had more space? How do you interact?
It's interesting. So it's like each issue's 22 pages as opposed to Marvel's 20. So it's slightly more pages per issue, but then it's 4 issues instead of your 5 or 6, which is more typical kind of at Marvel or DC. And so it's just a different kind of a container. Like it's like a different pacing. And again, the pulpiness of it, I feel like it lends itself to that quite well. In the arc we're in the middle of now, so that's this Twisting Loyalties is essentially 2-part stories that we're going to be putting into a trade paperback. And they do hang together thematically, but there's 2 different artists. But for everything else we've done, it's been 1 artist across 4 issues. And it's very early on, that was the preferred format that Titan wanted. They were very much about the 4-issue kind of arc. And I found it a little bit challenging at first, but then it just seemed to clip in a way that, again, felt very pulpy to me. And I was like, all right, we've got enough room to breathe. And now with I'm currently writing issue 27, 28. So it's my God. Right? Well, yeah, because 19 just came out. So, I've got 28 issues plus Blackstone was 22. That was 4 issues as well. If anything, the thing that throws me off is when I have to do a Savage Sword story. So I finished up a 32-page Savage Sword story. And in some ways I was like, I got too much room. Like I got to figure out, I need this to have more heft. I need to do more stuff because I've got the room to play in a way that I'd gotten used to this 20 or 22 page kind of format. And so they're all different kind of challenges, for me as a writer, trying to play to whatever the strength of the artist is going to be. This arc that I'm writing right now is going to be interesting. So I can say this, although I can't go into the exact details. We're going to play with that form even more because issue 25 is a special, for lack of a better term, anniversary issue, because that's what you do. And it was something that I felt really strongly about. So we're doing a self-contained, oversized issue. So it's going to be a done-in-one story. And then 26, 27, 28 is going to be a 3-parter. And so then that's going to be different again. And thematically, they're going to hang together, but they're 2 very different, distinct stories. And so it's like kind of testing myself and pushing pieces around. And even the type of story that I'm doing, I think is going to feel very different from pretty much any other Conan story I've done, in terms of what our focal point is. It's an era of the character that I have not explored before. It's the kind of storytelling that is in a lot of Robert E. Howard stories, but not something that I have really focused on previously. So it's a cool challenge for me and a fun way to kind of flex those creative muscles and see if I've got the kind of whole canon, worked out and that this thing, am I just blowing smoke? I don't know. All these issues of Conan. It's crazy because by end of the summer, unless I'm mistaken, I will have the second most number of Conan writing credits. So after that point, so Tim Truman, I believe, was number 2. He has over 50 issues under his belt, which is amazing. And the issues he did for Dark Horse are awesome. But by the end of the summer, between the Marvel stuff and the Dark Horse stuff and now the Titan stuff, I'll have more, and with a lot more still to come. So yeah, it's kind of wild if I think about it too much.
I guess there's still a bit of a gap between you and Roy.
Yeah, Roy's got over 300 issues of Conan credits. No one will ever touch that, and that is just fine. He can have the gold. I will happily take silver and get as much distance as humanly possible between me and bronze, and that's how we'll do it.
So it's curious talking about obviously form, structure, and even just page count and how that sometimes dictates what you're able to do in your storytelling. If you were writing a Marvel book tomorrow, would you really notice that those 2 pages or those 2 or 3 pages you'd be losing?
So one of the things you'll notice about almost every single issue of Conan that I've produced at Titan has a 2-page spread. Almost every single one has a big blowout visual moment that we build up to. And that is by design. I really wanted these moments that even in the 70s, they wouldn't have them very often in Conan. They wouldn't have 2-page spreads as much as I felt like the material, could handle it gravitas wise or whatever. And so I've got Rob De La Torre or Doug Braithwaite drawing these godlike, phenomenal battles and crazy settings. I want to be able to open up that scope. I want to be able to you turn that page and it stops you in your tracks. And I'm sure I could do that with 20 pages, but I'm fearless about it when I've got 22 because I can still I do have 22 pages of story, but I've essentially got 20 more pages of narrative heavy stuff or plot progressing stuff. And then I can blow out that 2-pager and go, check this out, and there's the moment. That's the one that people are going to remember when they close the cover, and what may have you. And not that, again, I wouldn't do it on a 20-page, but I'd feel it crunching a little bit more around the edges.
Interesting. Now, you talked obviously about, you've had so many fantastic artists, and obviously now we have a new one. I guess in the 2 issues that we just saw, 17, 18, we had Danica, Breen or Breen?
Danica Breen, yeah.
So where did she come from? Because she's great.
Yeah, she's wonderful. Danica is a fellow Canuck, so she's a Canadian who lives in New Brunswick. She's amazing, and she is great people. I saw her, I met her years and years ago. And I don't even remember what convention I was at, and she was a big fan of Wayward. She ended up doing an alt cover for Wayward. She's done, a lot of commission stuff over the years but has only really kind of made her name in comics in just the last couple of years. And we were looking at this 2-parter, and it was sort of falling between the schedule of other people. And I was kind of like, I would love to bring in someone unexpected. I would love to bring in someone who can bring this very distinct quality. I love the way she draws environments. She's got a real classic kind of art feel, but not in the same way like De La Torre does. She does really, really lush environments and really cool spaces. She draws beautiful, women. And I was like, well, this is going to be this Belit and Conan story, and she's going to be a big part of it. I think she could be the right fit for this thing. And so we were able to work out all the pieces. And this is easily the hardest thing she's ever drawn. She's never done this kind of extensive reference and extensive action and like very particular. Like the Conan fan base is nitpicky and I'm nitpicky because I'm a fan, and we're trying to really, the pedigree on the book right now is ludicrously high. And so even with all the resources we gave her, I think we did drop her in the deep end a little bit, and she I freaked her out at first, and then she got into a good rhythm on it.
I mean, it's interesting because, like, in the first couple pages of, I guess, her first issue, like, you have, like a whole city on a hill, and she has to, draw all that detail, and also the boat that's in front of it. Like, that's not a small amount of stuff. No,
it's a ridiculous amount of stuff. Who writes these things? Why would you do that? So,
a couple pages in, when Belit and Conan kind of come into, I guess, like an inn, I can't remember exactly, or like a bar, and there's just so much detail. Which it's interesting. I look at it and I'm like, I don't think she had to go this hard. Like,
no, I'm describing spaces, and there was definitely room for her because it's nighttime when they arrive. So you could have put a lot of that in shadow. Same thing with the what we call the Haven where they're staying. She could have put a bunch of that in shadow if she really wanted to, but I think again, she was sort of pushing herself at every turn. Like, Conan is a character in a world that seems to bring the best out of artists. It really does. Like, that's not just me saying it. I think you look at the original Savage Sword, you look at the original monthly run, and a lot of artists like found themselves on that title. They found something very special artistically. They found something very special in terms of storytelling. And I think she was feeling that pedigree in all the best ways and wanted to really push herself and see what she could do. And so even when I'm sort of choreographing some of those fight scenes and I'm trying to explain to her like how brutal it's going to get, again, that's one of those things that it's easy to say it. It's a whole other thing to portray it,
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting. We've obviously seen Conan throughout your run, have dalliances with romantic leads, but obviously Belit is a different type of beast, and Conan obviously feels different. So you have a romantic scene with him and Belit, and it does fit different. And so I found that she really did a good job of portraying that visually, that this isn't the same as his typical kind of jaunts.
No, totally. And that's very much, and I know for a lot of the fan base, there is sort of like, post-Belit Conan has changed. Like, his outlook on kind of life and romance and everything is very, very different after she passes away. And so I wanted to kind of give this rich sense of why that is, why she is, his equal but also sort of laying the tracks. If you're reading the way she talks and her forcefulness and her intensity and the blindness that she has to, her own mortality, those are the same flaws that are going to get her killed. And so she's not, how did I describe this? She is the bad girl, that no one would bring home to their parents. Like, she is the ultimate kind of, oh, she's so bad for you, but she's so good. Like she's irresistible. And you see that in Doug's arc as well. Like when we were doing arc 2, Thrice Marked for Death. And it's like those flashback moments where she's somewhere between terrifying and hot as hell. You know what I mean? Like she's threatening Conan with a knife, and then she's like, okay, we're going to make this blood pact, to say that we will never die kind of thing. And it's like, oh geez, like it's sort of, I had John C. Hawking, who's genuinely one of the best Conan pastiche writers. He did a phenomenal job on City of the Dead, which Titan has recently published. He is genuinely one of the best like Conan prose writers. And he's praised me on the way that I do Belit. And he said, I would never have written her because I'm too afraid of screwing it up. And you just went in there fearlessly and you did it really well. And that was like a huge compliment to me. Because I was really determined to sort of show these qualities that she is not, I don't know. She's not just like a bad girl. Do you know what I mean? And she's not just whatever, the strong female hero. She's not quite those archetypes. She's dangerous and she's flawed, but she's got such powerful will. And in that way, she's very much like Conan, that the two of them are these survivors, and she doesn't end up surviving, but she has that same mentality in terms of like, we're going to grab the world by the throat and it's going to give us what we want, you know?
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
One thing I wanted to mention as well about the issues that Danica does, you have the art by, I guess, Yao Canola.
Yeah.
And what really took me, what I was really taken with in terms of the art, or as the color art, I should say, is the splashes of red for blood. There's just something about them that were very arresting and really jumped off the page. Like, it's almost like it made the rest of the colors for a moment feel like black and white because it was so stark and it really jumped off the page. So every moment when there was any blood spilled, you really felt it.
Yeah, you know, I feel, again, our team is so strong. Like, Diego Rodriguez is a great colorist, and he's been working on both Doug and Rob's stuff. And then Zhao had done, he had also colored Blackstone with Jonas. And so he's just another, you know, amazing colorist that we have in our stable. And it was like, okay, I think he's going to make for a good fit with Danica. And again, I think those first few pages, you're trying to figure out the way through it. And he was sort of finding his style. And then once he keyed into how her line art worked and what her strengths were, he just got it, and he brought so much mood to the table. He's doing the same thing with Ivan's work on Scourge right now, where I think the first few pages he was really intimidated, like, oh my God, it's a totally different kind of look, but then finding his sort of rhythm with it and then realizing, yeah, this is a really good team all the way across. It's
interesting because he feels like a chameleon because the coloring is so different between Battle of the Blackstone and these two issues that Danica did, but obviously that's by design. You have a different artist. You wouldn't want the colors to
and different mood, different purpose of the story. Like, when I'm writing the script, I'm talking about what our intent is, like what atmosphere we're trying to bring across or what emotions we're trying to evoke. And he figured out on Blackstone that this thing was going to be like somewhere between weird, creepy Bronze Age, you know, comics and like a blacklight poster. Like, it was just going to get really warped. And he did a great job, and he figured out kind of his way with Jonas's stuff to make beautiful mood. And then that's obviously not the goal with, you know, a 2-part story about kind of romance and heists. Like, that's just not going to be the same kind of approach. And so, you know, he is a bit of a chameleon, and he's done a really good job. And it's a hard job too, because I started as an artist and a colorist specifically. So when he sent his first round of colors, I gave him a slew of notes, and to sort of key into a couple specific things that I was looking for. And then I got more specific as we went through the scripts. And once he kind of got it, then he locked in, and it really worked. But you know, everyone's giving it their all on the series, on the event books, on Savage Sword. Like, it feels so good to be with a crew we're all deeply, deeply committed, you know, to the property and to just delivering our best every single month. It's kind of dizzying, you know, the amount of artwork that's rolling through my inbox at any particular moment. Like, I got a letter proof for an issue this morning. And Richard Starking's, you know, friggin' legendary letterer. We're just like John back and forth on Messenger, and we're making small tweaks to captions or shifting some text around or whatever, because we all want it to be as good as it can be, and just, you know, really poking away at every little portion of it until we're all very happy.
When you're doing notes for Canola, like, are people ever surprised or don't realize that you do have such an extensive art background? Because not that a lot of writers aren't literate, but they might be coming at it from a very different place or don't have as much, you know, experience in that area. And obviously you very much did, or so you, because obviously, like, you even ran an animation department at you know, at an educational institution. Like, you did all this stuff, and so you're coming at it with a much more, you know, keen eye than maybe some writers would. Are people at times taken aback or don't realize that when they, you know, start a project with you and they're like, oh, wait a minute, Jim really knows what he's doing?
Yeah, I think some people aren't aware of that. I think Zhao was thrown off a little bit at first. Like, I gave him some pretty extensive notes. There was 1 or 2 pages where, and I don't do this very often, where I went in and I just said, hey, can we make an adjustment like this? And I sent him a quick little example of something in terms of light and shadow that I wanted to bring out something a little bit more. And then he was like, can you just send me the layered one? And I was like, sure, no problem. This will make it even easier for you to understand sort of how I got that effect or what I'm thinking in terms of that. But I try not to do a lot of that. And obviously once someone's got a handle on it, I'm not there to micromanage. I do want this thing to be, if something's plot critical or something's mood critical, I will definitely bring it up, and we'll kind of go back and forth. But for the most part, I also want them to feel a real sense of ownership on what they're doing. Same thing with the line artists, of course. Like, it's interesting because I'm doing both versions of writing. Like, I'm writing for Braithwaite with full script. And then for Ivan and for Rob, I've been writing, and for Fernando as well, I've been writing plot style, where I'm doing it like the Bronze Age, like Roy or Stan would have back in the 70s, where I'm outlining. I probably write a little more than they did, but here's the main things that happen on the page. Here are the key moments, but I don't tell you what paneling to do. I don't tell you what dialogue is going to be there. And then the artist lays out that page in rough. Sometimes we'll do some minor tweaking, or I'm like, hey, there's a little more chatter here than you might realize. We're going to need a little bit more headroom for word balloons. But most of the time it's just like, looks great. Now I'm going to fit my narration and dialogue to your layouts. And most of the artists, I know some artists, I've talked to them about it and they're just like, I would never do that because it's such you're putting a lot more onus on the artist to determine the storytelling. But it's interesting that a lot of these artists, particularly the European guys, that's their preference. That's really where they shine because they want to have their hand really on the steering wheel. Someone like De La Torre doesn't want to be told this is 5 panels. He's going to find it in 3 or he's going to find it in 7, like whatever he needs, Fernando Dagnino, who's drawing, he's drawing issues 21 to 24. He's an amazing, amazing artist. This guy has done, bande dessinée and stuff across Europe and a bunch of graphic novels and beautiful, beautiful work. It's unnecessary for me to tell him, okay, this moment's a close up. Okay. Now we're going to show you this. Like, this guy knows his stuff inside out. And the type of paneling he does is very different from Rob, very different from Doug, very different from Danica, but it's totally worthy and totally valid. And when I come to do the dialogue and the captioning, I need to kind of adapt to his art to make the best version of it that I can. And if I do that, then the holistic whole is going to be better rather than me telling him, all right, 6-panel page or whatever.
A general question, would you or could you ever see yourself, both writing and drawing a Conan story?
I don't know. One of the things I'd sort of talked about was like the artwork of Conan doesn't play to my strengths as an artist. Like my figure work is pretty good, but Conan is half naked all the time. So like if you can't draw that kind of buff, badass figure consistently from all those dynamic angles, you're really putting yourself on your back foot. And it's not that I couldn't, I just fear that it would take me absolutely forever to do. Like in doing a convention sketch, I can do a nice Conan head sketch or even a bust shot, like a Head and Shoulders or whatever. And people are like, oh, you should draw Conan. You're like, yeah, I don't think you realize I appreciate exactly how much skill goes into those pages, that when you've got that figure, it's all well and good to have the guy just standing there holding a sword or grimly looking like he's going to tear your arms off. It's a whole other thing to have this guy running and jumping and eviscerating people in all these locales. These guys are phenomenal artists and we certainly don't hold back on anything. And so then it's a matter of, if I'm writing it myself and I know the poor bastard who has to draw it is me, would I just curb all my own instincts? Do you know what I mean? Like and make it a worse story. Which isn't to say that it's impossible. I definitely want to do, like I talked about with my wife, this idea of doing a complete graphic novel in my retirement, that when I've got the time, and I'm still writing stuff, but I can just sort of poke away page after page and do kind of a thing, but a story that would play to my strengths visually, more so. And I don't know that Conan is that thing. I visualize that stuff, the words come out of me, and I'm definitely more than ever, I can feel that kind of pulp beating heart in the way that I think about storytelling. I just don't know that my art is suitable in that sense. I could see myself doing a variant cover or a pinup or something like that, but those are kind of easy outs compared to doing a sequential story, you know.
You don't have to worry about the acting of the characters.
Oh my God. Or I've only got to do one. I've got to do one killer pose or a couple characters. Do you know what I mean? Like, and you can lavish that attention. Like, have you been seeing, Liam Sharp has been posting up samples of the Savage Sword story he's working on. And it is the most insane, like Barry Windsor Smith hatching kind of wild stuff. Like untouchably phenomenal, like just ridiculous. And it's like, that's what Conan means to him, is he wants to just kill himself for every ink line. And it's like, yeah, I could probably do something like that for a cover, and it would take me way too long, you know, and I could sort of camouflage the fact that people be like, oh, you should do this all the time. And you're like, I don't think you understand. It was sort of like, you know, yeah, just even when I did the short story, I did the prose story for Savage Sword, and it's like, God, 5,000 words, 6,000 words. And it was one of the most excruciatingly difficult things I've ever done, because I'm not only doing Howard, I'm doing Howard in the Howard format, which is short stories like it's for Weird Tales. And all my inadequacies and fear about, am I full of it, you know, suddenly come crashing down on me. Because Howard's one of the best pulp writers of all time. And you're trying to, first you're using his characters, and now you're in the ring with him trying to form sentences like the man without just copying them. And it was just like, oh God. And I pulled it off, but you don't see the blood between every sentence, you know. You don't see the like, I sent that, my wife laughed. I kept sending it to her to read it over, and she's like, Jim, it's just a short story. And I was like, you have no idea. It's the 50th anniversary of Savage Sword. It's the first issue of the new magazine. Joe Jusko did his first Conan cover in like 25 years. And they told me to write a prose story based on that cover image. Like, if I can faceplant anywhere, this is the spot. This is where all my, you are full of it, you know, imposter syndrome is just going to come to the fore, you know, or whatever. And, thankfully it worked out. I sent it over to Jeff Shanks, who is our phenomenal, you know, like Howard expert resource, who writes all those essays in the back. And he's like, it's good. And I was like, I need you to phone me and tell me it's good, not just an email. Like, I want to hear it in your voice, because I need to be convinced, because I'm so terrified of this story. But then Jeff wrote one of the short comic stories in issue 4. And I was like, man, you got 10 pages. It's nothing. You'll be able to blast through this. And he was freaking the whole time he was working on it, because it was the first time he'd ever written a comic. And I was like, you're fine. And he was like, why aren't you stressed? I'm like, because it's comics. That's no problem. I've written thousands of pages of comics. I've written like 9,000 pages of comics. So it's a different, muscle memory at that point.
Absolutely. I want to ask a question about Frozen Faith. One thing that at first I wasn't expecting the change from the first issue and then onwards to the chapters 2 to 4, you have the switch between your typical, narration boxes, and now we have a different narration box, but it's actually Atali who's actually narrating. And that took me a minute, because I was like, what happened? What happened to starting? This isn't what I'm used to.
Yeah. Because that was a cocky move. What do they think they're doing here?
Because it went from something that it was so used to, because, I mean, obviously I've talked to Richard before about how much he takes this seriously, and how, every color, of a box, like, he really puts so much thought and effort into all of it because it means so much to him. And so I was going through this, I'm like, what just happened? And I realized, okay, it's so different because now we're getting a narration from a specific observer,
and
which is so different.
For the first time in the Titan series, we're going in someone's head. Like, one of the things that, Roy realized when he was writing Conan in the 70s is there's no internal thought balloons. You know what I mean? That's not Conan. We're not going to get that internal voice. We're always getting that literary kind of third person narrator kind of driving and telling us things about. You also don't get, here's something you may not have even realized. If you look through the 70s Conan, there's almost no sound effects. Because Roy realized quite brilliantly that if you just did like / ugh, pages and pages of guys killing each other, that it was going to get real old real fast. And so instead you have this gravitas in the narration where they're discussing whatever, the coppery smell of blood in the air and the flexing of sinew and, you know, like all this stuff and bone and steel and iron and just like whatever you can do to raise up this literary kind of quality, but also slow down the reader. So as they're reading all this poetic kind of lyrical description of sensory information, it's like the battle takes on more gravity, more weight, more intensity, and it feels much cooler for it. And so switching over to a character's internal voice was very much a stylistic choice that I felt like we could do something different. You know, Frost Giant's Daughter had been adapted multiple times before, and we could easily just fall into that pattern of same old, even with Doug's brilliant artwork, that people were going to feel like they've been there, done that. And so what can we bring to the proceedings to make it feel different? And then the container of sort of Conan's fears around faith and the idea of, I didn't want the Sumerians or Conan himself to just be, you know, whenever you have a fictional culture, like all the Klingons are the exact same. You know what I mean? Like, or all the, whatever, all the elves in Lord of the Rings are the exact same. You're like, no. Like, Conan, by his very nature, is rebellious because he leaves Sumeria. That's the whole thing. All the other Sumerians stick around, and he's one of the only ones that wants to see the world. He has this wanderlust. So right from the very start, you've said he's not like the others. So if all the others give lip service or believe in Crom, maybe he didn't. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe he tests that or needs more proof or, you know, whatever, let alone when you're a kid and you question everything, right? So it felt like all these different pieces were kind of coming together. And then in the Robert E. Howard canon, Frost Giant's Daughter is the youngest story of Conan. He's 15, 16, I think, when he's out there in Eastgard running around, and he runs into a Tali. And so then I was like, is that the first time he's ever interacted with the supernatural? Something that he could not put into a simple container of his senses. Do you know what I mean? And if it is, then that is a revelatory moment in your life. That is a huge transformation of how you see the world. Because up till now, you are one of the strongest bastards ever. And everything you've been able to conquer, you know, you fought ad Venarium and you were 15, 16 jumping over the wall, first front, killed all these Aquilonian soldiers. You know, you kill a bear, you monster these wolves. Like, the physical world makes sense to you and you conquer it. So what happens when you finally interact with something that you cannot conquer or that you do not understand? And how does that change your outlook on everything? That was sort of the multiple sort of pieces that were floating around in my mind as I was trying to form this story and say something different and say something personal about faith, but within the context of Conan's world, but also something I'd never seen the character ever kind of question Crom. And I was like, well, this is a third rail. Either we're going to do something really electrical good, or I'm just going to burn myself real bad. But we got to try stuff, because if you don't, then this character who's been in publishing for over 90 years and over 50 years in comics is going to be stale. And that's not to say that I want to throw out what makes the character special, but you have to investigate and you have to sort of try and plunge into areas that, although it is still Conan, you've never quite seen a story like this. You know, I felt like I was able to do a little bit of that when I did The Gambler back at Marvel. We did this 3-part story, Patch Zerker drew it. And that's inadvertently the Conan story that changed my life, because that was the one that got on the radar for Heroic Signatures, the guys who own the rights to the character. And I thought Jason was going to be on the book for a long time, but he was only going to do 12 issues. So almost as soon as the book launched, they were starting to look for a new writer. And then I did this 3-parter, and that really popped for them. And they were like, maybe this guy. And lo and behold, what I thought would be my last chance to write a Conan story became my audition to now take over this, dynasty. Like it's ludicrous.
Do you ever feel like you're chasing the gambler? Like in terms of like the high of that because of what it meant to you, because of what it ended up meaning to you, where it led you? Do you ever feel like you're chasing that?
The nice thing with The Gambler is it's self-contained. It feels like a Weird Tales story. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It doesn't have long-term ramifications on the character, but it feels very impactful and interesting. It's entertaining. You don't even need to really know Conan to be able to read it. And so I'm really proud of it because it feels like a Weird Tales story in the best way possible. It's funny because I pitched 2 different stories. I pitched The Gambler, and the other one I pitched was called Leaving the Garden, which we ended up doing as a Savage Sword story for the new Titan Savage Sword. So that's in issue 2 of Savage Sword of Conan. So both those kind of Weird Tales style self-contained stories that I thought that they had the right stuff, I've been able to do them both, which is very cool. And in some ways, that's kind of a dream that once I finish this monstrous mythological kind of thing I want to do over the course of 50 issues of the monthly book and multiple events, there is an end point and it is built and we know what we're heading towards. But if I keep writing Conan after that I can write more like drop-in stories that are just like, okay, here's a great story of Conan and he's young or he's old. This is what's at stake. This is what's cool. Let's go. And it's not that I'm not doing that now. It's just, it's almost like the X-Files, like we've got our whatever, the big conspiracy sort of beneath it all that I always have to sort of, key into. Whereas later on, it's like, I hope that I can just sort of do cool, badass pulp stories where you're like, yeah, Conan's about this old. He's in this part of the world. Drop him into an unexpected situation and let's go,
Coming back to Frozen Faith just for a moment, because you're talking about how it ended up being about kind of this faith and how Conan has to wrestle with something he doesn't understand or like he thinks he understands the world, and now there's something that upends that. I appreciated how you, again, kind of challenged structure because you get to the end of the 3rd issue, you think the arc is over. Like, right. It feels like that's the end point,
especially
right?
Since that's the Frost Giant's daughter. Like, issue 3 is essentially the Frost Giant's daughter. One issue, it kind of pays that whole short story off.
But then you get this whole other issue where, again, you draw, like, obviously throughout the arc, you were showing, images of young Conan and what he was kind of growing up with, and then you kind of come back to it in this 4th issue, and as you said, you have him kind of confronting this existential dread.
Right.
Like,
yeah,
him having to deal with something he's not used to dealing with, and it's really impactful. It's really interesting, and even just how you kind of end it off with him kind of setting out again about, all these mysteries that may never reveal themselves, but being open to that is such an interesting way to end it. But again, not what I expected, because at the end of chapter 3, I was like, oh, I guess the story's over. I wonder what's next.
Why do I still have another issue in this arc? Yeah. That idea of the climax in terms of the issue. Well, not that issue. The climax of the overall story is sort of the Frost Giant's daughter and this interaction that he has with a god and Ymir, saving Atali and all that stuff. We still have that powerful transcendent kind of moment, but then it's like, I just thought so much about what if you've never, like literally this is the first time you've seen something like this or had this kind of an experience. How does it affect you? How does it affect everyone around you? You know what I mean? Like the other, guys he was traveling with, he says he's interacted with this goddess. What does that mean? You know what I mean? Do they believe? Do they not believe? And the ones who become jealous, we're able to bring that back around. Those guys that sort of messed with him in the first part, now, they kind of get their comeuppance in an unexpected way. And like I was really happy that we were able to explore the themes differently than people expected, pay them off in a way that people didn't expect, but still keep the central core of the Frost Giant's daughter intact and just sort of ripple it outwards, both forwards and backwards, to get to it in a way that gave us a little more meat on the bone. And then after the fact to sort of go, because I think some people, that first part comes out and they're like, oh, they're flashing back to when he's a kid. Like that's such a kind of storytelling cliche. And it's like, but there is a reason, and we're going to come back around to it. And then it'll all kind of make sense that these questions he has about faith need to be answered. Otherwise the story's not done yet.
Mm-hmm. In the third arc, The Age Unconquered, when you do have De La Torre back with you, did you, like, how early do you know that, like, I'm going to do a story with Cull, I need it to be Rob? Like, is that what you're thinking? Or, like, what about designing the story? Like, how much of it do you think of, well, this is who I think would be the better artist for this particular story that I have kind of noodling around in my brain? Like, where are you at with that? And is that part of the alchemy or the mathematics of it all, of just trying to figure out, okay, well, who's going to
we're definitely casting. Like, so Chris Patero's, my editor on the book now, and he and I talk all the time about who the right fit is for these stories. So one of the benefits we have is that we're not chronological. Like, I wanted the flexibility to be able to jump around. So both Marvel and Dark Horse took this chronological tack to the monthly, where they were just going to tell you every damn story of Conan kind of in order. And what that means is that once you get to Queen of the Black Coast, then Belit's going to be around until she's not. Do you know what I mean? And once we're done the Conan is young stuff, then we can't do Conan is young stories unless it's a flashback or something. And it was like, in the original Weird Tales, the very first Conan story that's ever published, he's already a king. So it's like, that's the tradition. They jump around all over the place. It's like the old man's telling you all these stories out of order, but you're kind of getting them when you need them. And so that was the sort of tact I wanted to have, is that, for lack of a better term, when you have an iconic character, there's an infinite number of stories that take place between these canon stories. And so I don't want to say, okay, Conan goes here and then he has 3 months and we're going to chronicle every day between here and there. And that all of the stuff that wasn't the canon stories feels like filler. You're just waiting for Tower of the Elephant to start, because that's a real Conan story and everything else is just something else. And it's like, the goal has to be, every story we do has to feel as important as the Tower of the Elephant, or as iconic as, and that's a cocky thing to say. Like, I'm not saying that we're going to be able to always achieve that, but I have to act like that's the case. Like, that Scourge of the Serpent, or Twisting Loyalties, or any of these stories that I'm doing, has got to be just as important to Conan as Red Nails or any of the Robert E. Howard canon stories. Because if I don't treat it that way, then the readership can feel it. They can feel that this doesn't matter, that this is just, the grist between the mill, rather than it feeling like something really cool. And so when we were doing like The Age Unconquered, I'm like, this is the biggest, baddest ass epic ever. And we're going to have Cull and the Thurian Age and Brule and all this stuff. This is an epic. First of all, I knew the first 12 issues that was what Titan had promised me. Like, Titan and Heroic didn't know for sure that the relaunch was going to work. And so they said, no matter what, you got 12. Like, even if I completely faceplant sales wise, they were willing to hold on for 12 issues so that they'd get a complete story out of it. And so I had to treat those first 12 like every single issue is, we're knocking it out of the park, because that might be it. These might be the only 12 I ever get to do. This incredible, unique opportunity. And it's not to say that I'm resting on my laurels now. I'm just, now that I'm in that headspace, that's the way we do it. Like, every story's got to feel really big and really impactful. Or if we're rolling the timeline back to, okay, we're doing this 2-part heist story with Belit, it's because there's information that you need that we didn't need to tell you till now, but now I can pay that thing off. So, for example, 19 and 20, in issue 8, there's a flashback that shows Conan traveling in the jungle after Belit dies. And we just mention it really briefly in this flashback. Well, now 19 and 20 is where we show you that particular story in full, because what happens there becomes incredibly important to the Serpent stuff that we have coming up. So we get to roll the timeline back because now's when you need it. Now you need to know the information that we've got there, and dramatically it's going to be cooler. And if you're paying attention, you can sit there. I know some readers have asked me, okay, so what is the exact order of all the issues chronologically? And it's like, well, don't try and read it chronologically, because will it work? Yes, but it's not going to be as satisfying dramatically, you know?
Do you have a whiteboard out with all the chronology?
That
is the big question.
Well, not a whiteboard. I do have a big planning sort of graphic sheet that I put together. And like the thing I'm doing right now, we're punting off into another era of Conan. And it's like, great. Now I can put a bunch of pieces into place that we can use later on. And we'll get back there later, but we're going to set up a bunch of sort of structure. And then we can leave and go back to a different time. It's fun. It's a fun kind of creative journey, instead of being just like, all right, it's another week in the world of Conan. You're like, okay, is he young? Why? Why does he need to be young in this story? Is he in his prime? Why? Why does he need to be in his prime in his story? You know, like what are the particular narrative qualities? What are the character qualities? What are the threats? And where is this most appropriate? And keep readers more focused on the entertaining quality of the story itself, instead of, like, again, I've got it all figured out. So it's not like you have to, you know, you can find that through line and figure out, oh, we're doing the flashback. Like if you look at the start of Frozen Faith, you know, Conan takes out that bear, right? Well, we show him carrying that bear on his back in the flashback in issue 1.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, right? So 12 issues later, we show you the bear hunt and what it actually means. So the narration in issue 1 that says like something to the effect of he couldn't find anything that could challenge him, we show you what that challenge is. And that challenge is not just a physical threat, it's a spiritual one. And, you know, part of that is stuff that I had planned, but not necessarily. I'm hoping that when it's all said and done, it looks like a finely tuned watch. But, you know, there's still mushy bits that I'm trying to figure out for myself. But when it's all finished, if people are like, wow, the architecture is perfect, every single pillar, you know, holds up, you're like, well, then we did our job, you know.
Now, I do have to let you go in a moment, but I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about what was both the experience and what led you to the recent Zub campaign for Skull Kickers.
That's a good question. So, you know, the Skull Kickers, for anyone who doesn't know, was the action comedy sword and sorcery book that inadvertently really kicked off my career. Like, I had done some comic stuff before that, and I did a webcomic. I did some little writing here and there, but that was the series that finally kind of showed people, oh, this guy can put out a book and can make it come out regular, and it's fun, and maybe he could be a writer, you know? So, it's cast a magic spell that led to Pathfinder, which led to, you know, everything from whatever Samurai Jack and Dungeons and Dragons and eventually Conan, all my Marvel stuff, like just a ridiculous number of titles flowed from the well that was Skull Kickers. And so it had launched in 2010. We did a 10th anniversary Kickstarter in 2020. But the original books had started to fall out of print at Image. And there's always that weird moment where you're like, okay, reprinting the soft covers, you can't really do that in really small numbers, but we're not going to sell enough of them with the same trade dress the exact same way. And so the books start to fall out of print. And once, you know, whatever volume 4 is out of print, well, now retailers aren't even going to order the other volumes because they can't get them all. And so it starts to go fallow. And a lot of people had done these omnibuses, and I was sort of like, okay, we might do an omnibus, and that would be sort of cool. I think those things look great on the shelf, but as an actual reading experience, I find them obnoxious. If I'm being 100% honest, like you put them on your knees and you're like, I'm not really reading the comic. I'm just I have this Funkin' Wagnall's dictionary in my lap. And I'm not, it looks great on the shelf, but it's not enjoyable as much. And so we were looking at all sorts of different possibilities. And at the same time, I had met the Zoop guys because they did Colossal Conan, which is that artist edition of original artwork from the Conan 70s and 80s comics. And I wrote an afterword for that, which is mind blowing to me that, you know, I got to write this essay to wrap up that book. Roy wrote the intro. Like, what the hell? And so we were already in touch, and they were asking me about stuff I was interested in. Image decided that they were just going to let the stuff go out of print. And so I had the rights all back, and I'm like, I got to do something with this. And then that DC Compact stuff came out, and those books looked so great. And the form factor was really good, and the price point was good. And I was like, I think there's something there, and I want to do that. So it's not for me to say, but there is a mainstream publisher that is going to be publishing Skull Kickers in that format. And then we decided, look, what if we did a limited edition version via Zoop, where we had some fancy little extras and cover treatments and a slipcase. And then there's going to be a mainstream bookstore edition that's going to come out. And then there's going to be this fancy dancing one that we did with Zoop. And that's how that all happened.
And now I would imagine you already, what is it like to see it in this size and style?
I think the artwork works really well because it's got that animated kind of feel. I feel like it's very much a form factor that the modern readership is now used to. You know, manga is everywhere, and it's got way deeper penetration than, you know, standard graphic novels. And so I think it's a great format. I think it's going to make for a really fun gift and package. And for a lot of people who still haven't read it, it's like, look, if you like my stuff on Conan or Dungeons and Dragons, if you think I write fun stories, you've got to check this out, because it's sort of like the primordial Zub sword and sorcery. And if you have read it and you know it, you know, you like it, then it's great as a gift, because it's just going to be that great little format that you can give to a manga reader or a D&D fan or anyone, and they're just going to key right into it.
I must admit, I have sadly never read it, but I did back the Zoop campaign, so.
Oh, well, thank you.
I do look forward to reading it and having it on my shelf. And I guess I should ask, like, is it all ages friendly? Like, would my 11-year-old be able to enjoy it?
Yes.
Or would it be, like, keep it away from him?
No, we've got the Grolix whenever anyone swears, and it's very cartoony and goofy. It's like violent, but like in a cartoony way. So, you know, monsters getting their heads, you know, cut off and stuff, but in like a goofy way rather than like a grim, horrific kind of way. It's basically, it's me playing Dungeons and Dragons when I'm 8 years old. Like, this is what I imagine these adventures are like. Do you know what I mean? So it's like ludicrous, over the top morons hunting these monsters and getting themselves in trouble and having to kill their way out.
What was your impression of the response to the Zoop campaign?
It was fine. I knew that it's always tough because you're trying to get an existing fan base. So it's like a lot of people have the original Skull Kickers trades, you know, so I knew that was going to be tough. And then some people, it was like, I wasn't sure, do people want signatures? Do they want original art? Do they want those things? So we had, you know, a pretty good turnout overall. I think that there was sort of, we just said, look, we're doing this thing anyways, and this is going to be a cool little extra. I want to see what it's like to work with the Zoop team, and they were really great. I feel like all those guys, Jordan and those guys, are great, and they're really hardworking. And I'm so busy now that having someone else to handle fulfillment and all that stuff is really, really mission critical. Because I did the Kickstarter for Skull Kickers in 2020, and even with help, I had George Rohack and a couple other people help me out. I had people help me with the RPG book and the artwork and the layout, and it was still a monstrous amount of work, like just crazy, to get that thing done. And we did. We got it out. The book looked great, but the idea of doing that again, I just thought, oh my God, like, I just don't have enough hours in the day, you know, so. It's wonderful to have those resources at your disposal. It's the same reason why, like, I signed with Comic Sketch Art for conventions. So they're this agency that they rep probably about 60 different creators, like Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo and Frank Miller. You know, they rep, oh my God, just a crazy amount of people, Chip Zdarsky and all these other people, Jody Hauser, and just lots and lots of my friends. And they are handling conventions. And it's like, I've done conventions myself for 20 years, and the logistics behind, okay, how are we getting product? How are we getting that stuff to the convention? Who's responsible for whatever, negotiating with the con, hotels and flights and what panels are you on and what things you have to do. And it's like when you're starting out, you just want to break even on a show. But then you hit a weird moment where you're like, okay, the good news is I'm a guest of the show, but now there's all sorts of other logistics and things you need to deal with. Mm-hmm. And my wife and I were doing it literally for, 15 years. And she was really good at negotiating with every convention. And we had 100 little favors we could call in with local retailers, or you get to the end of a show and you have a box of books and you have no way of getting it home. And you're like, okay, what are we doing with this? Like, how are we dealing with this? And we had all these solutions. And then we did lockdowns. We came out of the pandemic and we did like 2 shows, and they were some of the most difficult, stressful shows we've ever done. And she was like, I didn't miss this at all. Like I know this is fun and parts of it are fun, but like this is so stressful and frustrating. There's got to be another way to do this. And so in much the same kind of element as like working with Zub, it's like, okay, someone else can handle this stuff now. And the first few shows I did with them, it was so wonderful because I could just like pack my suitcase with just carry-on clothes and go to the show. The booth's already set up. The stuff's all there. I've got my signing times. I can have a big breakfast, and then I can focus on what I actually love, which is interacting with people and give them all of that energy and excitement and do the social, which is the whole reason I do conventions in the first place, instead of being like, okay, as the show starts, I'm already half exhausted. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, and what are we going to do when something doesn't work properly? Do you know what I mean? And so now it's like I get to do the social side of the thing, and the vast majority of my time is spent doing what I love, and it's a better experience for me, and it's a better experience for people meeting me. And the team, this is what they do, and they're setting up for 12 creators or more at any show. And so I'm part of that process instead of, like having to do all the little individual annoying things. And I'm very thankful. I'm very thankful. Like, I know other creators don't have that benefit right now, or they're at a different point in their career. And I felt guilty about it. I did a couple shows with them, and at the end of the show, I'm literally just walking away from the table, going to the airport. And I could see other people I could see them as I walk by their table. They've got that look of fear of like, what am I going to do with this crap? Like, how am I loading this all up? And I'm just like, doop, 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 time to get a cab, and you feel weird about it. You feel guilty. But then, on the other hand, I'm talking to the sketch art guys and they're just like, Jim, you've been doing this for 20 years. Like, someone can carry your boxes now. And you're like, yeah, I guess that's true. But I certainly don't take it for granted because I've been on the other side of that and I know exactly how much goes into it.
Absolutely. Okay. Final question, I promise. Obviously Marvel has their upcoming Thunderbolts movie. So your Thunderbolts run is now newly represented in a consolidated trade of all of it that just came out last month. So I'm really curious. I mean, for a lot, people who didn't.
Well, my first Thunderbolts run. Yeah, the 12 issues.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. Yes. Thank you for that correction. Because actually I had a question. I would have asked you a question about that, but I guess what's it like to have that come back out again and kind of on shelves, obviously in time for the movie? That was, one of your first big Marvel projects and kind of your coming out party at Marvel.
It was my first monthly, in the Marvel universe. It's cool. It's fun to look back on it. It's neat to have people interacting with it for the first time and being like, how did I not know this run existed? It sort of got swallowed up in the Secret Empire-ness of it all. You know what I mean? Because it's right before Secret Empire. And that whole thing has got such a weird vision at Marvel, you know what I mean? Because of when it came out and how it was received, that it was sort of like I was in the midst of all that, but also doing my own kind of thing and trying to prove myself, in the Avengers office with Tom Brevoort and Alana Smith. And so, I have a lot of nostalgia wrapped up in that. Like, I can look at individual issues and know exactly where I was, when it was coming out. I think one of the weirdest things for me was the book actually launched while I was on a trip to Japan, which was kind of surreal. So the first issue came out while I was in Japan, and it was just like, okay, I'm a Marvel writer guy now, which is kind of crazy. Yeah, it was such a fun thing. At the time, that was the only book that Bucky Barnes was regularly showing up in, and the Winter Soldier movie came out later that year, and it was just like, holy crap, you know, it was a really fun thing to sort of be a part of and be in the midst of, and to see the interconnected kind of the machine, sort of how the engine ran, and figure out my way through it and sort of prove myself. And even when, I was hopeful we would get to relaunch the book after Secret Empire, and we didn't. I had proven myself enough with Tom that I got moved over to Uncanny Avengers, which then turned into, you know, No Surrender and No Road Home, those 2 weekly events that we did with the Avengers, where I got to work with Mark Waid and Al Ewing and, you know, Pepe Larraz and Sean Isaac and Kim Jacinto and just all those artists who were so phenomenal. And so it had a profound effect on my career, obviously. And so, again, I look at those early issues and I can see all the warts and all the little things I would do different now. But on the other hand, like it worked. You know, we were able to find our way through it. And I think there's some really fun, kind of heartfelt stuff in the midst of all the kooky action.
Absolutely. It's interesting obviously it has the Thunderbolts name, so that's why, you know, it would be reprinted now because obviously, you know, corporate synergy and all that.
Sure.
But it is interesting too because as much as Bucky is, you know, right in the forefront, which again aligns with the new movie, you know, your run more than most others since, I guess, Fabian really, you know, had the original team. It had the original guys in a very prominent way, which hadn't been done as much. You know, you had the Luke Cage kind of version of the team, which was very different. Even after this, you had different versions. Even your other version with Hawkeye leading the team was also a very different beast, whereas this one, in a lot of ways, hews most closely to that original kind of Busiek/Nicieza version in terms of the original characters, while also having Bucky, this more modern construct. So it's an interesting combination. So it makes sense that they'd reprint it just for the name alone, but it actually, you know, works on a lot of other levels as well.
Yeah, and I don't know the story of the new movie, but the impression I get, for example, is that the team is gonna, you know, it's been spoiled all over the place. You know, the Sentry's gonna be part of this thing, right? So he's this sort of incredibly powerful character that is going to be running around. And I almost get the impression that he's like the equivalent of the Cosmic Cube. Like he's there. He's the thing they need to guard or hide or whatever, which is sort of what we were doing with Kobik. And so I don't know that it's going to be plot relevant, but I think that there's a thematic kind of tether there as well.
Absolutely. Well, again, people should pick that up if they don't already own it. It's a nice hefty trade. It's 12 issues?
Yeah, 12 issues. It's called Thunderbolts Winter Soldiers. It's funny because the reprint editor, he called me, God, this must be like a year and a half ago. And we were talking about they were going to reprint it, and we were bandying a bunch of titles back and forth because they didn't know what to call it. And I said, you know, Winter Soldiers, and that was one of my options, and they really liked that one, so that was what they used for it.
Nice. Well done.
Yeah, I feel like it.
You might have a history. You might have a future in this business.
Yeah. It's funny. I was, you know, I came up with the No Surrender title as well, which I'm pretty happy about. So yeah, you know, sometimes a good title can be its own thing. I love coming up with pulpy, fun kind of titles like Battle of the Blackstone or Scourge of the Serpent. Like that just feels very, I don't know. I like those kinds of things. You know, titling is hard, but when you get one that works, you know, you feel it kind of in your bones.
Did you come up with the rascally Richard Starkings?
So all those adjectives, I think those are Matt Murray's. So in the earliest issues of Conan, they didn't even tell me they were doing that. I didn't see that till I saw the first proof. So he gave me the nickname Grim Jim Zub, which is what is on all the issues of Conan now. And I can tell as someone comes over to me at the convention and the first time they've ever interacted with my work is through Conan, because they literally go, "Oh, you're Grim Jim." Like they literally tell me that's my name. And I'm like, yes. And then sometimes they react oddly where they're like, "You don't seem grim at all." And I'm like, yeah, they call the big guy tiny. Like that's the joke, you know, like I'm not actually grim. Like it all comes out on the page, all the rage and the, you know, bloodletting and the whatever. But, I'm just a kindly Canadian, you know? So
I just think it's interesting that you got one that's a rhyming one, but
right.
Everyone else got one that was, what's the word? similar.
Oh, yeah,
similar
yeah. They've got all the ones that are, why can't we think of what that's called?
Right?
Jeez, it's just words. It's just my career is using words. Why would I remember what they mean? Alliteration. There we go.
I got it.
Totally.
Yeah, because you had Jaunty Jonas, you had Judson Zhao, Rascally Richard, and you're Grim Jim.
Yeah, Dangerous Danica Breen. Yeah, totally.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah. It's funny how that goes, but yeah, the Grim Jim worked really well, and like I said, it has kind of changed Conan's changed my life at this point. Like, it's one of the biggest books of my entire career. The book's in 10 languages now, and so we get fan mail from literally all over the world. We're getting international invites like I've never had before. And, it can be hilarious. Like, these guys, and some of the book came out in Portuguese, and these dudes are like waving the book and screaming on a live stream. And all I hear is them saying El Barbaro, El Barbaro. And then a bunch of, intense whatever. And then the name Zub just sort of punctuates a sentence every so often. And you're like, well, I hope that's a positive thing. They seem excited, that's good. So it's very cool. Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming back. I've taken so much more of your time than I initially expected. So it's been about an hour and a half. So I very much appreciate your time. And again, you have so much coming up, but I guess it's the upcoming crossover later this year, the free comic book issue if people want to get in on the ground floor, and obviously the monthly adventures of Conan as well.
Yeah. The monthly adventures of Conan the Barbarian. That's crazy. When I think about it, I tell people, we start talking, I say, I'm the flagship writer of Conan the Barbarian. And then the words come out of my mouth and I go, that is true. Like, I no matter how many times I say it, it still feels very, unusual and exciting and amazing. So from this little kid from Oshawa.
Absolutely. Well, that's fantastic. And thank you so much for joining us. And, I'm sure we'll have you on in another year or so, probably to talk about the next crossover.
That'd be amazing.
All right. Thank you so much.
Take care now.